Good evening, everybody. So we now move on to the second lecture of the series of functional hemodynamic monitoring and dynamic indices of fluid responsiveness in critically ill patients. And Group A indices we have discussed already in the first lecture, and now we move on to Group B indices. These indices are also based on the mechanical ventilation induced variations of norms, but the difference between the Group A and Group B is that they are derived from the non-stroke volume derived parameters. These variations, which we are going to measure to predict fluid responsiveness, are from non-stroke volume derived parameters. First in the series of this Group B indices is left ventricle pre-ejection period variation. And let's understand what this is. This is nothing but isovolumetric contraction time of the left ventricle. The interval from ECG R wave to the foot of the invasive arterial pressure wave is actually calculated, and then offline analysis is done, and then it gives us the variation in the isovolumetric contraction time, variation which is induced by mechanical ventilation. So PEP expiration minus PEP inspiration divided by the mean value multiplied by 100. Well, we need a dedicated monitor, ECG and invasive arterial pressure to deduce all this, and we will. So delta PEP, which is the pre-ejection period variation, can also be calculated by using plethysmography, and same formula, but here the ECG R wave to the foot of the plethysmographic wave will be calculated by the dedicated monitor. And in place of invasive arterial pressure, we will use a plethysmographic wave. One is invasive and one is a non-invasive technique. Then we have the measuring the variations in the diameter of the great vessels, which also are very good predictors of the fluid responsiveness. One is the SVC collapsibility index and other is the IVC distensibility index. So let us understand the two differences. One is measuring the collapsibility and another is measuring the distensibility. That is by the virtue of the fact that SVC lies within the intrathoracic cavity, and because of its anatomical position, the ventilation or inspiration induced intrapositive, positive intrapleural pressure is conducted to the SVC, which collapses under the influence of inspiration, and the greater the collapse, the greater is the predictive value of the fluid responsiveness. Diameter max minus minimum divided by diameter minimum multiplied by 100, and you need a transesophageal echo for that. We will be discussing all these again one by one. And in the IVC, the IV inferior vena cava dilates under the influence of the positive intrathoracic pressure by the virtue of the decrease in the venous return, and thus the IVC dilates, and then we measure the distensibility of the IVC, which predicts the fluid responsiveness. Here we do not necessarily need a transesophageal echo. We can measure this dynamic index with transthoracic echo or abdominal echo. So coming to left ventricular pre-ejection period variation, as we see, we need an invasive arterial pressure and the ECG curve, and from the start of the QRS complex, the point number 1 to the foot of the invasive arterial trace, the point number 2, we get a pre-ejection period, and this pre-ejection period gives us the isovolumetric contraction time, and the variation in this period due to mechanical ventilation, that gives us the variation, and that variation threshold is 4% and sensitivity is 92%, right? So that variation which is important to us under the influence of mechanical ventilation, and that predicts the fluid responsiveness. It is an interesting index as it is easy to measure. Only ECG and arterial pressure recording and a dedicated monitor is needed. Plethysmographic delta PEP is even less invasive, and here at least you need an arterial line. There you don't need that. You can use a plethysmographic curve. The key point for great vessel oscillations is that indices derived from oscillations in great diameter vessels, they are considered to be very good predictors because they are very obvious. The changes are very obvious, right? And in fact, the SVC collapsibility index is considered to be the best of all parameters described. Remember, if you get an MCQ to answer which is the best dynamic index from stroke volume derived parameters, your answer would be pulse pressure volume, variation, pulse pressure variation, right? Or if there is delta down, delta down. So delta down and PPV constitute the best from the stroke volume derived. In case you get all the dynamic indices, covering all the dynamic indices, then the answer is SVC collapsibility index. It shows a bimodal distribution with all and none phenomenon, and so a sharp separation of responders from non-responders is possible. Threshold value is 36%, and it needs a transesophageal echocardiography for measuring this. We see here that in the left half of the frame, you get a patient with a cardiac index of 2.4 liter per minute per meter square. See the SVC is collapsing here. And this was before volume expansion. After volume expansion, we get an improvement in the cardiac index, and it has improved to 2.6 liter per minute per meter square. Let's move to the right side. Remember in the earlier class, in the earlier lecture I had mentioned that if you continue to give fluids beyond a point, it can actually cause harm. And here we see we have got objective evidence to it. In this case, the cardiac index was already 3.2 liter and the SVC was not collapsing. Fluid was administered, and then we see a cardiac index has deteriorated to 2.6 liter per minute per meter square. And so more harm has been done to the patient rather than the good. So IVC distensibility index, it shows a good predictive value. Sensitivity and specificity is more than 90%. Threshold value is 18%. It is a less invasive as transthoracic echo or abdominal ultrasound is used in this case. And we can see here in this picture, this is the IVC plotted against the respiratory cycle. During the expiration, you have the minimum IVC distensibility, whereas during the insufflation, you have the IVC distended and you have the maximum diameter of the IVC. But these values could be affected by the raise in intra-abdominal pressure. Remember that. If the intra-abdominal pressure is raised, these values will not be predicting good. They will not be rendered as a good predictors of fluid responsiveness. So there are limitations to group B similar to group A. These also have been validated in sinus rhythm and controlled ventilation. So the similar limitations apply to this group also. But having said that, from theoretical point of view, the SVC and collapsibility and DIVC can be useful in patients with arrhythmias or spontaneous inspiratory efforts, since they rely on vessel diameter and not on the cyclic stroke volume variations. So now coming to discuss the group C indices, which are based on preload redistributing maneuvers. See, the important demarcating point here is that group A and group B, they depended on the variations induced by mechanical ventilation, whereas the group C indices are independent of standard mechanical ventilation. So that is the main differentiating point. Remember that. And these have been introduced to overcome the limitations, some of the limitations of group A and group B indices. So there are three described, let us take one by one. Inspiratory right atrial pressure variations. Spontaneous inspiration induced right atrial pressure variations are found to be good predictors of fluid responsiveness. RAP minus RAP inspiration. The negative intrapleural pressure during spontaneously breathing patient is conducted to the right atria, which is responsible for the inspiratory fall in the right atrial pressure. So this you remember as a concept, and you will it will be very clear for you to understand. It can be monitored using a CVP and a PaOP curves. And next is the aortic blood flow variation induced by passive leg raising. Here the difference between the aortic blood flow during the passive leg raising and baseline aortic blood flow is calculated using a esophageal Doppler. So aortic blood flow passive leg during passive leg raising, subtracting the aortic blood flow baseline value. That will give you the difference, and that difference will be predictive of fluid responsiveness. Third is the respiratory systolic variation test. Here the lungs are inflated with increasing airway pressures, and then the systolic arterial pressure is measured after every inflation. So inflation induced systolic pressure variation can be determined. What you need? Invasive arterial pressure trace, you need airway pressure monitoring, you need a dedicated recording system for offline analysis. So the delta RAP, if it is 1 millimeter mercury or more, that is a fall in the RAP is 1 or more during inspiration, it is indicative of probability of increase in cardiac output in response to fluid infusion. In studies, it was found that in one of the studies, in 13 out of the 14 patients who had no fall in RAP, when cardiac fluid challenge was given, there was no increase in cardiac output. Whereas 16 out of 19 patients who observed a inspiratory fall in RAP of 1 or more than 1 millimeter mercury, it was seen that cardiac output increased by more than 250 ml per minute with fluid challenge. Sufficient inspiratory effort to lower airway pressure by 2 millimeter mercury is the rider in these cases. So what about the passive leg raising test? Here you see in the picture, just like the picture, the passive leg raising test consists of measuring the hemodynamic effects of a leg elevation up to 45 degrees. A simple way to perform the postural maneuver is to transfer the patient from semi-recumbent posture to the passive leg raising position by using the automatic motion of the bed, right? This is a simple way to perform. And see, the passive leg raising is based on the principle that it can induce abrupt increase in venous return, secondary to the auto transfusion of the peripheral blood from the capacitative veins of the lower part of the body. Very clear, remember this point, the auto transfusion of peripheral blood from the capacitative veins of the lower part of the body. Remember, it is non-invasive, it doesn't need fluids, it doesn't involve heart-lung interactions, it is repeatable and reproducible, it is easily reversible unlike fluid bolus, it can be safely performed in patients with poor cardiac rhythm, it can reliably assess volume responsiveness even if the patient has spontaneous breathing effort or arrhythmias. So how many advantages, and what a simple test to perform. No extra fluid, no heart-lung interaction, no complexity, simple test, so many advantages, and we can get a lot of dynamic indices just by this simple test, which can be done in ICU with the automatic motion of the bed. And you need, of course, a dedicated monitor. We will also discuss the limitations of this test, of course. But in response to PLR, the descending aortic blood flow is measured by esophageal Doppler. The increase in cardiac output can be observed with the help of continuous cardiac output, monitor, dedicated monitor. So the thing that eliminates the subjective element of the measuring the Doppler and all that. The end diastolic volume, the stroke volume, etc. are measured by transthoracic echo. If we are doing want that, we can use transthoracic echo. Pulse pressure variation and stroke volume variation can be measured using a PICO or FlowTrack Vigilio dedicated monitor. So how many indices you can get by a simple test? So now coming, what are the limitations? The intra-abdominal hypertension of more than 16 millimeter mercury impairs the venous return and reduces the ability of the PLR to detect fluid responsiveness. And echocardiographic techniques are operator dependent. It cannot be used as continuous real-time monitoring. So you see how it is done. Get the patient in a semi-recumbent position, take a baseline value, then use the automatic bed adjustment without touching the patient, for you may induce pain or etc., which can alter the hemodynamics. So just bring the patient in the 45-degree leg raising position, use a real-time measurement of cardiac output, assess the PLR effects by directly measuring cardiac output, not with BP alone. Then bring the patient back to the normal baseline level. Wait for 1 minute, reassess the cardiac output in semi-recumbent position. they should return to the baseline values, and then you can take a call regarding the volume expansion. So the other is respiratory systolic variation risk. Priceman introduced it in order to identify a dynamic index which could be independent from tidal volume. They administered 3 consecutive mechanical inspirations in pressometric mode, increasing the airway pressure breath by breath and recorded invasive arterial pressure. Analyzing offline arterial pressure tracing, they identified the lowest systolic pressure after each breath and plotted these arterial pressure values versus the corresponding airway pressure values, obtaining a straight line. The slope of the line, which is called the RSVT slope or the respiratory systolic variation test slope, is the desired dynamic index, and it quantifies the negative effect exerted from the airway pressure to the arterial pressure. The predictive value is extremely good, but measurement is not easy, and thus it is not very suitable for clinical routine. This is a flow chart of spontaneously breathing septic patient where we can see what steps we can do to decide on the fluid response. If the patient's cardiac function is normal, we can just do the IVC distensibility. If it collapses more than 50%, just take a call and give fluid bolus. If the IVC collapsibility is less than 50%, do a PLR. If or doing a PLR, cardiac output is more than 12%, give fluid bolus. Doing a PLR less than 12% cardiac output increase, then you can resort to pressors. Septic patient with a cardiac dysfunction, straight away do a PLR. PLR more than 12%, give fluid, less than 12%, give pressors. So in this one flow diagram, we see this is the mechanical ventilatory cycle. During the inspiration, due to increase in transpulmonary pressure, the increase in pleural pressure, and the changes on RV after load and LV after load and RV preload and LV preload, we have a resultant decrease in RV outflow and increase in LV outflow, leading to stroke volume max during inspiration or at the end of inspiration. And then after pulmonary transit time, there is a decrease in LV preload, decrease in LV outflow, leading to minimum of stroke volume. So these variations are plotted in respect to the ventilatory cycle. And we can here see also that how the right atrial pressure fluctuations lead to the IVC diameter during the inspiration. There is a decrease in the venous return leading to distension of the IVC, and when during expiration again there is a contraction of the IVC. So let us also discuss some objectively what are the limitations of the respiratory variation in stroke volume for predicting fluid responsiveness. Respiratory means mechanical variation induced stroke volume changes which we use for dynamic indices for predicting fluid responsiveness. So what are the limitations of this? Well, when a patient has some breathing efforts under mechanical ventilation, then there is a limitation because the breathing efforts will affect that. And these are more pronounced when the patient is not intubated and patient is spontaneously breathing. When in the presence of cardiac arrhythmias, we cannot interpret correctly. Conditions in which variations in intravascular pressure induced by mechanical ventilation are of small amplitude, like low tidal volumes. Then again, we cannot interpret correctly. And if there is a high frequency ventilation, the ratio of heart rate to respiratory rate is low. That is, if the respiratory rate is elevated, that is the number of cardiac cycles per respiratory cycle may be too low to allow the respiratory stroke volume variation to occur. So high frequency ventilation also we cannot properly predict the fluid response. Then in condition like increase in abdominal pressure and then open chest conditions. So these are all some limitations of which can affect the indices which we have already discussed. So what? So next thing is the alternatives to the respiratory variation of hemodynamic cycles. So these are include the recent advances which take away the effect of the ventilation variation and arrhythmias and all those things. So let's see how it is. There are three which have been described: and expiratory occlusion test, mini fluid challenge test, passive leg raising test, which we have already actually discussed, that also comes into the category of alternative to respiratory variation of hemodynamic signal for predicting fluid response. So EEO, it was demonstrated that a 15-second expiratory occlusion test increased the arterial pulse pressure or the pulse control derived cardiac output by more than 5%. The response of cardiac output to a 500 ml saline infusion could be predicted with good sensitivity and specificity. We'll again understand this in the next diagram. Advantage is that it exerts its hemodynamic effects over several cardiac cycles and thus remains valuable in case of cardiac arrhythmias. Well, this is the main advantage. Other theoretical one is that it can be used in patients with spontaneous breathing activity unless the marked triggering activity interrupts this. Well, the spontaneously breathing septic patient will definitely be in tachypnea and they will not be able to hold in expiration for 15 seconds. So I don't think this is much of practical value. It's more of theoretical value. So what we do here, we start the monitor and take a cardiac index, baseline cardiac index, then apply end expiratory occlusion for 15 seconds. And if the change in cardiac index is more than 5%, then that is indicative of fluid responsiveness. Then you can take a call and then we can consider that the patient is fluid responsive. If the clinical status demands, then you can give fluid. So this is how it is done. This is the airway pressure plotted, and here you see the arterial pressure tracings. And here you have employed 15-second end expiratory occlusion test. And after that, because of the venous return, the preload continues to increase. And when you release that, then you get a upright in the cardiac output, increase in cardiac output, and that becomes the test for fluid responsiveness if it is more than 5%. In the mini fluid challenge, obviously the easiest way to test preload responsiveness is to administer fluid and to observe the resulting effect on cardiac output. Yes, it is obvious. Now the disadvantage of the classical fluid challenge is that it consists of administration of 300 to 500 ml of fluid. Because it is not reversible, such a fluid challenge will contribute to fluid overload, especially when it is repeated several times a day. So mini challenge consists of administering 100 ml of colloid over 1 minute and observe the effects of this mini fluid challenge on stroke volume as measured by the left ventricular outflow tract time integral using transthoracic echo. In a clinical study, an increase in the velocity time integral of more than 10% predicted fluid responsiveness with a sensitivity of 95% and a specificity of 78%. The small volume of fluid is unlikely to induce fluid overload even if repeated several times a day. So it is easy to perform and can be assessed in a non-invasive way. These are all advantages. Nevertheless, a strong limitation is that even in cases of preload dependency, such a small volume infusion will invariably induce only small changes in cardiac output. This test therefore requires a very precise technique for measuring cardiac output. And the disadvantage is that it cannot be used in the presence of cardiac arrhythmias. This table gives us the threshold and predictive value of the dynamic indices, which meant most of them which we have discussed. See, like delta down, the threshold is 5 millimeter mercury, right? And for systolic pressure variation, the threshold is 10 millimeter mercury. For pulse pressure variation, the threshold is 12%. And for the delta V peak, the peak aortic flow velocity, it is again 12%, 13%. Aortic blood flow, change in aortic blood flow, 13%. And delta PEP, that is a pre-ejection period, it is 4%. SVC collapsibility, 36%. IVC distensibility, 18%. Delta RAP, that is the inspiratory fall in right atrial pressure, 1 millimeter mercury. And passive leg raising induced a change in aortic blood flow, 10%. So these are some threshold values. This is a flow chart which shows us how we go about taking a call regarding fluid challenge in acute circulatory failure. If suppose there is evident fluid loss or it is the early phase of sepsis, the answer is yes, then we can straight away give fluid. If the answer is no, then if the patient is spontaneously breathing, or is there cardiac arrhythmias, or is there low tidal volume employed, or low lung compliance, if yes, any of the answers is to this question is yes, then you can select the passive leg raising test or end expiratory occlusion test or mini fluid challenge test in these situations to determine the fluid responsiveness. If the answer is no to any of these, then you can use pulse pressure, stroke volume, respiratory variation, passive leg raising test, and expiratory occlusion test, and mini fluid challenge. So all these three plus other dynamic indications which are stroke volume variable, which are influenced, like stroke volume variables influenced by mechanical ventilation. So those also can be used. Some general considerations. A common limitation of all indices is that they can predict fluid response but not indicate the need for fluids. So when dynamic index indicates the state of fluid responsiveness, the decision to give fluid depends on the clinical status and on the effective need to improve hemodynamic conditions. More research is required focusing on patient outcomes. These are the references which can be useful to you. Thank you very much.